Meghan Markle is living a fairy tale, with a prince by her side and a castle of her own.
Frogmore is a royal residence. It is very grand.
One of the nicest things about Frogmore Cottage is that it is just a stone's throw away from the Queen's residence at Windsor Castle.
After a $4 million upgrade, it's decorated for a duchess.
Velvet sofas, old mirrors, coloured cushions.
There is a granny annex for the glamorous Granny Doria.
Meghan's keen to have a space for yoga.
Life as a princess may be privileged.
The butlers, the chauffeurs.
The cleaners, the cooks.
It's all very Downton-esque.
But Meghan's every move is in the public eye.
Probably the most difficult part of marrying into the royal family would be the fact that there's no privacy.
I think I'd find it quite difficult having people around you the whole time.
So she needs her palace to be a private sanctuary.
It's countryside, it's private, it's secluded.
It has a wall built around the property.
They can literally throw open their doors and windows, be totally free, totally private.
And now baby makes 3.
It's going to be a much smaller, intimate household in which they want to bring up their baby.
We know that they're going for a grey in the nurse, which I think is actually very chic.
It's going to be the chicest baby there is.
Well, I should hope so.
How will Meghan redefine what it means to live like a royal?
They want the craziness of being a member of the royal family to end when they go inside their homes.
It's a very modern princess thing to do, I think.
Modern princess, I like that.
Marrying a royal has given Meghan Markle access to one of the world's most famous real estate portfolios.
As the current reigning monarch, the Queen's actually one of the biggest property tycoons in the country.
The Queen has a property empire worth billions.
Everything from cottages, castles, palaces, all up and down the country.
Windsor, Sandringham,
Holyrood House,
Clarence House,
And the Hall.
Buckingham Palace,
Balmoral,
Frogmore Cottage.
Kensington Palace. There's a very sumptuous palace in the middle of London.
With so many properties, the Queen has plenty of space to house her family. After Meghan and Harry said "I do," she needed to find them a palatial pad.
It's long been tradition in the royal family for newlyweds to receive a home to start their new royal family life.
The Queen is also being very practical, that they need somewhere to live that is secure, that affords them the life that they would like to live, that gives them enough private space while also recognising that they are royal. She doesn't sit there sort of with a monopoly board. What is it that you would like? Where would you like to be living? Then she looks to see what's available.
When we got married, we didn't quite receive a house, did we? Maybe a toaster.
A small sausage dog for our wedding present.
The Queen's youngest son, Edward, and wife Sophie got lucky with their wedding gift in 1999. They live in one of the Queen's most splendid houses. A Victorian Gothic mansion with 57 rooms set in 87 acres.
Bagshot Park is one of the largest properties that the Queen's given out to her children or grandchildren. It's so big that just a few years ago, Edward and Sophie had to hire a programme coordinator just to look after the various members of staff.
There's the glass coach, driving directly past our camera.
When the perfect property isn't available, the Queen goes shopping. She splashed the cash to buy her daughter her dream home.
Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips, who she married, were both very, very keen horse people. And when they married, there were no properties available within the royal portfolio. And so the Queen found Gatcombe Park for them, which is absolutely perfect for their equestrian needs.
Gatcombe Park is very much a working farm, and there are saddles and riding boots and hay. No one is standing on ceremony.
The Queen funded her second son, Prince Andrew, when he and wife Sarah Ferguson built their own home.
They designed and built this huge country house not far from Windsor called Sunninghill Park. It seemed to be very brash and modern and very unroyal.
It was of a time. It was of the 80s, and the 80s were not the most beautiful aesthetically. I imagine inside it was filled with pelmets of swags of shot silk everywhere.
If you look at how Fergie dressed in the 80s, I imagine it would look like that.
I'm like big puffed shoulders, like the curtains reflecting that.
For sure.
It was immediately labelled South York after South Fork, the Dallas television series. I thought it looked more like a Tesco supermarket.
But Fergie and Andrew took it on the chin. They didn't care. They loved living there, and it's where they began raising their children.
But the house didn't last much longer than the marriage. It was sold to a Kazakh oligarch who let it fall into disrepair and then pulled it down. The Queen gifted Kate and William use of an apartment in Kensington Palace and Anma Hall on her Sandringham estate in Norfolk.
William obviously has been going to Sandringham since he was a dot, so he knows that area very well. It's relatively private. Part of William and Kate's decision to go to Norfolk was because they had this very tight-knit group of friends there. The Turnip Toffs, these would be people who'd been mates with the Queen and Prince Charles, multiple generations. That area of Norfolk in the summer is very happening for posh people. North Norfolk, the coastline, it's got very beautiful beaches, big houses where other sort of posh earls and friends of the royal family live, lots of big estates. It's certainly a very popular, posh British hangout.
With so many homes already gifted, what was left for Meghan and Harry? The Queen found them Frogmore Cottage, a des res hidden away on the Windsor Castle estate.
It makes sense to me that Harry and Meghan wanted to move to Windsor. For obvious reasons, Frogmore is very personal to them because it's where they held their wedding reception, it's where they did their engagement photographs. Harry has spent a lot of time in Windsor when he was at school at Eton. He loves Windsor.
It's not too far from the City of London, so they can easily get into town, but they've got the best of both worlds. It's countryside, it's private,
it's secluded, isn't it?
Frogmore itself has this fantastic history. Victoria adored it. That's where she wanted Albert to be buried. And all sorts of fascinating people have lived at Frogmore Cottage, including Abdul Karim, who was Victoria's favourite Indian servant. And they used to curry together. They used to talk about India together. They had this incredibly intimate friendship.
One of the nicest things about Frogmore Cottage is that it is just a stone's throw away from the Queen's residence at Windsor Castle. You're not far away from the Long Walk, and from there it's straight up to Windsor Castle itself. And I think for the Queen, having one of her favourite grandchildren nearby is quite a nice little luxury. I'm sure that would have gone through her mind when she gave Frogmore Cottage to Harry and Meghan.
Meghan and Harry's new home was under wraps for months, while a team of builders blitzed it inside and out.
Frogmore Cottage needed huge amounts of renovation. They've reported
£3 million.
Yes, £3 million worth of renovation.
It was previously 5 separate staff apartments for staff working in Windsor Castle, and of course needed to be returned back into one home, and a very different home to what it used to be as well.
There is a annex for the glamorous granny Doria, who's going to be flying in. Heathrow's so close, so it makes sense that there's somewhere for her to stay when she comes to look after the baby and visit the family.
Harry and Meghan are a modern family. They want certain spaces that weren't even thought of in previous eras. Meghan's keen to have a space for yoga, and Harry wants a home gym. These are things that members of the royal family didn't have in the past.
Meghan has opted for a very large grand staircase in the entrance with a double set of stairs either side. You can imagine Gone with the Wind. It's quite an American move, I would say.
I think so. I think the whole place is going to be a mishmash of very British and some American traditions. And this grand staircase, you can imagine, the car waiting outside as she sweeps down the stairs in a ball gown off to a glamour.
Meghan's in-laws, Kate and William, also took on a major renovation at their London home, Kensington Palace. It had once belonged to the Queen's sister.
When Princess Margaret had apartment 1A in the late 60s, 70s, it was very luxurious. It was beautifully decorated, very bold blue colours on the walls.
She had a wonderful sink in her bathroom that was pale pink, an orchid-shaped sink. I mean, I think I would have loved that more than any of them.
Princess Margaret was the polar opposite to her sister. Where Elizabeth was always rather frugal and restrained, Margaret lived in a much more extravagant way. She had a much greater sense of style than her sister. Her flat at Kensington Palace was famed for rather wild parties.
But the apartment was neglected after Margaret's death in 2002 and rapidly deteriorated.
When William and Kate took over apartment 1A, it needed extensive work. The windows, the roof, pipework, electrics.
There was asbestos, there was really bad wiring, heating that hadn't been updated. So it was a massive renovation job because it is quite a big property.
For you and I doing up a home, we're going to be thinking about the bedroom bathrooms and the kitchen, and that's about it. For William and Kate, there were 22 rooms to think about.
It might be a palace, but the Cambridges were keen to lead a modern, domestic lifestyle.
It was important that the kitchen would be the heart of that home. So it was the first time, actually, that apartment 1A had a proper kitchen installed that a family could use, not just a chef. It is Kate and William doing the majority of that cooking themselves.
Kate came from a pretty regular family home where lunch around a kitchen table, entertaining in that way, was really important. And I think it's great that she wants to continue that tradition with her family and her children. It's a very modern princess thing to do, I think.
Modern princess, I like that.
There was a report that the Queen didn't quite understand why would they want another kitchen, because surely that's where the staff work. And of course, that's the life that she knows.
Although the royals spent $4 million on the renovation of Meghan's home and around $1.3 million on Kate's, the Queen likes to be frugal when it comes to her own homes.
The Queen is very aware that many people in the country don't have much money, only have small houses, lots of people don't even own their own home. She's very aware of her public image, and unlike many other royals, before and since, she really hasn't renovated the palaces very greatly. They remind her of her happy childhood with her parents. She has moved into what they are and been happy with what she has.
However, after years of neglect, the Queen had to give Buckingham Palace a much-needed makeover. 2016 saw the start of a 10-year renovation project.
There's a lot on the dilapidated side. Bits were frankly falling off. Chunks of masonry from the portico. One nearly hit Princess Anne a few years ago.
It's incredibly run down in the places that we, the public, don't get to see, and requires a lot of money to bring it up to any kind of livable state.
Much of the palace's 100 miles of electric cable and 20 miles of heating pipework will be replaced in the $480 million refurbishment.
Now, much of Buckingham Palace hasn't been touched in 50 or 60 years, so there's boilers that are leaking, there's asbestos, there's dodgy wiring, there's so much that hasn't been replaced.
A major justification for the Buckingham Palace renovation was to avoid a catastrophic fire like the one which ravaged Windsor Castle in 1992.
The Queen was devastated by the Windsor Castle fire. She really sees herself as a keeper of royal history. So to see it go up in flames as quickly and voraciously as it did was devastating. The firemen, they were amazing. Prince Andrew did a very good job of sort of leading a chain where they were getting all the artefacts out, the art and the priceless antiques.
Imagine it's absolutely devastating. She is present inside the castle, helping to take stuff out of the castle to work smart.
The castle needed a 5-year, $50 million restoration to repair the destruction.
When they were doing the renovation, they did think, now that it's a burnt-out heap, how can we make this more energy efficient moving forward? How can we make sure that we restore it to its former glory, but make sure that the wiring is correct this time round? So, yes, they were able to use it to correct some old issues and bring it up to the present day.
As a future Queen Consort, the Duchess of Cambridge has to combine royal heritage, contemporary style, and the needs of 3 young children in her home.
Although apartment 1A is the family home, William and Kate do use it for official purposes. It's a potential palace for them when they are king and queen of the country, and apartment 1A has to adhere to strict royal traditions.
Whilst it's their home, it also needs to perform those formal functions, and it's mixing that traditional with the modern vibes.
So getting the interior design right was critical. Kate called in the professionals.
I knew that Ben Pentreath was helping Kate. He is very traditional, he likes gilt, and he puts things around fireplaces. Posh people are obsessed with fireplaces and mantelpieces, and then they have these sort of seats that you can sit on around fireplaces.
Ben Pentreath is perhaps the perfect designer for this space because he naturally, instinctively mixes the traditional and the modern. He uses touches of colour that bring a space into a more contemporary setting, and
Bernard Thorpe received the royal seal of approval when Kate visited to pick out fabrics.
When they've got a new client, interior designers will come to us. They'll probably have an idea in their mind of the look they're trying to achieve. We'll help them to pull out those things that we think they're looking for, and then they'll usually come back with their clients who probably want to see larger pieces of the samples they liked.
I love the fact that Kate was very hands-on when it came to the interior design. of the apartment. She actually went shopping for the house and she took part in the whole process.
It would be very easy to sit back and have things presented to you, but it doesn't have your personality. I think to have something that really means something to you, you need to have chosen it yourself, to put the hard work in.
We eventually got a glimpse of William and Kate's taste in April 2016.
When they invited the Obamas over when they were visiting the UK, we got to see their formal living room. People were very excited. All the newspapers were zooming in on various parts of the official photograph.
My first impression of the Barack and Will picture was actually that it was quite traditional. But when you start to break it down and look in more detail, you can see those modern touches.
It's very gorgeous, and the fashion at the moment is for elephant's breath and buttermilk and magnolia.
The curtains are a little bit too long, which I love. It's quite casual and relaxed. Yeah. They're obviously a sort of natural fabric. There's some texture there. It just is a nod to a slightly more casual. The loosening of the tie, if you like.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to go inside apartment 1A. I've had a lot to take in. Got George coming down the stairs in his pyjamas to say hello to Barack and Michelle, and of course Kate and William. The place itself is very impressive. It's very formal, a lot of artwork on the walls.
The juxtaposition of the lucite table with the demi-lune behind, gold gilt demi-lune no less, is just showing very stark contrast between the old and the new.
We've seen Kate shopping in places like John Lewis and very sort of, I guess, normal everyday department stores in the UK. And you can see touches of that around the home. I think it's a little bit older than perhaps what we'd expect for a couple in their 30s.
Kate and William are a relatively young couple, so I expected their apartment to reflect that a bit more, but instead we saw something which you sort of expect in Buckingham Palace, which might have been a room that had looked the same for sort of 200 years. I just thought there might have been a more relaxed vibe to it, and there wasn't. But then on the other hand, they do need to have a certain level of grandeur in these rooms, but I think there's a way of doing grandeur and not making it look quite so sort of 18th century.
Meghan and Harry are known to have more contemporary tastes and want a cooler vibe for Frogmore Cottage.
Meghan has a more relaxed style than Kate's, fewer dead relics on the walls perhaps, more contemporary art.
Harry and Meghan, I think, are creating more of a kind of hotel vibe.
I got a glimpse inside Meghan's home in Toronto, and she clearly loved white furnishings. It was all very clean, fairly monochromatic. It was cosy still, but she loved big white flowers. Everything was kind of white. And actually there's a flower seller outside St Mary's Church on Kensington High Street, and Meghan regularly buys flowers from her, and she said she always buys white flowers.
Harry and Meghan's first date was at an outpost of Soho House, Dean Street Townhouse. So they, since the very beginning, have been big fans of this chain. Makes sense that they've hung out there. It's very fashionable, lots of celebrities and members. And then we know now that Vicky Charles, who was the group design director for Soho House for 20 years, has been designing Frogmore Cottage. And so it's really her vision. If you go to a Soho House, it's quite shabby chic. Velvet sofas, old mirrors, sort of multicoloured cushions, log stoves.
The interiors there are all about atmosphere and creating somewhere that is really safe and comfortable and elegant. And I think we're going to see a lot of that translated into Frogmore. I think there's going to be lots of warm layers and textures, and perhaps some colour as well.
And this modern style even extends to baby Sussex's nursery.
We're actually using a vegan organic paint, which is scented with rosemary and eucalyptus. We know that they're going for a grey in the nursery, which I think is actually very chic.
It's going to be the chicest baby there is.
Well, I should hope so.
For Meghan and Harry, Frogmore Cottage is an idyllic escape from Kensington Palace, where they first set up home together. The palace is in the centre of London and surrounded by onlookers.
Probably the most difficult part of marrying into the royal family would be the fact that there's no privacy, or very little privacy.
The governess of the Queen said when the Queen was a child, royals are only private in the womb.
Kensington Palace also houses multiple generations of royals. It's essentially an upmarket housing estate full of Windsors.
Margaret was there, Princess Margaret, the Duke and Duchess of Kent, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, and now we've got a new generation, William and Kate and their 3 children, George, Charlotte and Louis. They now occupy apartment 1A. Eugenie and Jack, they live in Ivy Cottage. Harry and Meghan were living at Nottingham Cottage. It's a lovely, cosy 2-bedroom cottage. Of course, it's where Harry famously proposed to Meghan.
The palace was William and Harry's childhood home. Their mother Diana moved there in 1981, along with many of her staff and their families.
Father had been working in the press office for Charles and Diana. He was one of their press secretaries. It was actually very special living at Kensington Palace. I was in my late teens, and we would see William and Harry coming and going with their nanny. Diana would liken Kensington Palace to Coronation Street. I guess that's the very English version of Melrose Place.
Kensington Palace is stuffed with all the royals, all living together. I can't imagine living with my in-laws in that way.
It would be crammed in the same space, aren't they?
It must be like
sounds mean, but there's a lot of room, but you're right on top of each other.
Yeah.
I think it's just, you know, when you're living in close quarters with family members, there are curtain twitchers. People are sort of watching who's coming and going.
Princess Margaret, for many years, lived next door to Diana when she was on her own there. And I think, you know, Princess Margaret was very sympathetic to Diana. But I think there was also a feeling that the gardens were perhaps overlooked and there was not much privacy there.
After Diana separated from Prince Charles in 1992, Kensington Palace was surrounded by press photographers, eager for a shot of the world's most famous single woman.
She was constantly seen coming and going because in her era, paparazzi photographers were allowed to stand at the gates. So there was any number of photographs of her driving in and out.
Diana was very good at actually dealing with that. You know, reluctantly would give them a smile and a wave and look as though that she wasn't bothered. But deep down, yes, she didn't like it. She did see it as an invasion of her privacy.
If Diana happened to have a gentleman friend that she wanted to see, yes, they were smuggled in the boot of a car because that was the only way to avoid any kind of scandal, salacious gossip. It probably did feel like something of a gilded cage because she couldn't go anywhere. And that's why she had asked her brother, Charles Spencer, if she could have a bolt hole on the Spencer estate. He at first said yes, and then he reneged on that offer because he was worried that there was going to be too much press intrusion. And as a result, he and Diana had a frosty relationship. Sadly, they were never able to reconcile.
Kensington Palace became the focus of the world's grief after Diana's tragic death in 1997.
Harry watched what happened to his mother, and he, I think, is absolutely determined the same thing will not happen to Meghan.
Frogmore Cottage gives them absolute privacy and discretion. They're able to raise baby Sussex in the most peaceful environment that's only open to the public 3 days a year, but it has a ball built around the property, so when that public is there, they will never get to see the Sussexes.
I think they're going to love their life there because they can literally throw open their doors and windows, be totally free, totally private, totally secure, and it'll be a beautiful place to raise a family.
Meghan and Harry may be raising a family now, but they're also taking on more royal duties as the Queen steps back. So where do they escape to when they need a break from the day job?
When you're a royal, you can't just pop to a hotel in France for your holiday. It would just be chaos. So you have to use your palaces. You have to go to Balmoral for summer, Sandringham for Christmas.
Meghan was invited to spend Christmas with the royals at Sandringham before her marriage.
It was King George V that said there was no better place, I'm paraphrasing, but no better place that he loved than Sandringham. King George VI, the Queen's father, felt the same way. And for someone who's now been Queen for 67 years, there's very few opportunities where you're not on duty. She has memories in those places with her own family as well, so those moments are to be cherished.
The Prince of Wales bought himself a hideaway of his own just before his marriage to Diana.
Highgrove is very much a Georgian country house. It's got a nice atmosphere about it. It's just got a much more family-orientated feel.
It's a place he loves to spend the most amount of time. It's a place he feels most at peace.
But Highgrove isn't everyone's idea of the perfect hideaway.
I think Camilla finds Highgrove, it's Charles's place. It's not their place. He lived there with Diana. I guess quite a lot of her memories will be from the Diana years when the War of the Waleses was in full flood, when the ghastly tape recordings were being published of their late-night conversations. It was a very difficult time for her and a very painful time for her. And the place she and Charles love to be together is Balmoral, up in Scotland. That is, I think, where they are at their most relaxed.
Charles inherited his passion for Scotland from his mother.
The Queen really loves Balmoral. It is her beloved place, and I'm not sure whether any monarch ever again will love Balmoral like the Queen.
I think she just loves the family time that she's afforded there.
The Queen ensures she's surrounded by family at this remote Scottish castle, inviting William, Kate, Harry and Meghan to spend summer holidays there. Only a few privileged guests from outside the family get to join them.
My dad has a great story. He got to go up to Balmoral and the Queen invited him and their other guests for the weekend on a picnic. And then after the picnic, everybody clears up together. And he went to the sink and he didn't really pay attention to the person standing next to him. He just said, as one would, "I'll wash you dry." And this voice very curtly says, "No, I'll wash you dry." And it was the Queen. She's not precious. Yes, we want her to behave like the Queen when we're seeing her out in public, but I kind of love that she's like the nation's favourite granny too.
And when Meghan stays at Balmoral, she'll need to be careful what she packs.
I know that Cherie Blair, the wife of the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, the Prime Minister's always invited to go and stay up at Balmoral, the Queen's Scottish castle, and Cherie had packed and didn't realise the first year they went that a butler or valet would unpack for her. I was then mortified to find out later that they'd unpacked her stuff and her contraception had been put in a bathroom cupboard. This is why they say their son Leo came about, because when they went back the next year, she didn't pack contraception, supposedly, because she was so embarrassed at the thought of a
fixture on the Queen's calendar. But is it really the perfect summer vacation spot for Kate and Meghan?
Kate loves that same royal lifestyle. She loves all the outdoorsy things. She wants to be surrounded by dogs and out in the stream. Meghan, I'm not sure. She's a California girl, so while I think she would appreciate the countryside, I think she'd find Scotland quite tough. Meghan's made no secret of how much she loves the sunshine and yoga outside on the beach, and Balmoral, you've got to be made of pretty stern stuff because it can be very cold up there even in the middle of August. I'm sure she will go because Harry will want to go and she'll want to go and share that part of his life with him, but I'm not sure we will see them go for perhaps the same length of time as they would have done in previous years.
Meghan and Harry will be spending a lot of time at Buckingham Palace. They have a suite of rooms there to house their support staff and provide them with a London crash pad. The palace is also the Queen's office and needs a cavalry of staff to keep the wheels rolling.
There is a difference between the Queen and the younger royals in terms of servants. So essentially, the Queen has the biggest staff. Not only is Buckingham Palace the hugest residence, but also her needs in terms of events, her political work. There is still a huge amount of state visits to her, so the staff necessarily has to be very large.
There's 450 Buckingham Palace staff working just on the private residences there, and that's not including the spaces that are open to the public or to any of the kind of garden spaces. It's a very busy palace, from the footmen,
the private secretaries, the butlers, the chauffeurs,
the cleaners, the cooks, the office staff, PR,
the housemaids, the housekeeper. It's all very Downton-esque.
The royals have jobs done for them that we don't.
The man who winds the clocks.
There's 450 clocks in Windsor and 1,000 clocks in Buckingham Palace. The clock winder at Windsor Castle, it said it took him 16 hours to wind up all the clocks there. So by the time you've done one load of clocks, you've got to start all over again. The dresser is something that seems a very unique royal job. They will organise the outfits, they will sort out everything with the dry cleaners, they will pack everything, and they will also help to dress you. The Queen's relationships with her dressers is incredible, and there's a brilliant story that one time 2 of her dressers were arguing so much that she came down to the servants' quarters to bed down because she just didn't want to interrupt, because they're both so important to her. She didn't want to interrupt and get in the middle of the fight. The Queen has her own shoebreaker in her, and why not? She has a lot of walking to do. They are custom-made shoes, and the shoebreaker in her takes them and walks around Buckingham Palace until they are the perfect level of softness for the Queen to wear.
Some of the traditional jobs at the palace might seem rather eccentric to a modern-day princess.
For the Queen at Buckingham Palace, things are a little different. She has a piper, a bagpiper, that plays for her every morning without fail. She loves the sound of the bagpipes, and for her, that's the perfect way to start the day.
The royal footmen have the key job of looking after the royal corgis, and sometimes they are a bit resentful that they don't get to serve the actual royals, because the corgis have a lot of needs. Fresh chicken, fresh meat, cooked for them freshly, put in their bowls and their baskets are off the ground so they don't get drafts. And some footmen in the past have been a little bit frustrated by this.
When Meghan's at the palace, every royal servant she comes into contact with is going by a strict code of conduct.
The house is packed full of people. You're really supposed to try and be as inobtrusive as possible because you cannot bump into a royal. So it's not an equal sharing of the house. It is the royal's house. And so if they are trying to get somewhere, you need to get out of the way. And that's the way it works.
And all staff are sworn to secrecy.
It's the fear that even the most trusted servant might one day sell his soul. And your story, your innermost secrets, will be splashed across the front page of a newspaper.
There have been royal members of staff who've gone on to a degree of fame, notoriety, to a degree of financial reward. I think the most fascinating story is Miss Marion Crawford, who was the governess of the Queen and Princess Margaret when they were little girls. She went with them to Buckingham Palace when their father became king. She was there for the courtship between Elizabeth and Philip, and she was such a trusted member of the household. They told her everything, they were devoted to her, and when she left the household, she wrote a book about the princesses, about everything. And this was published in America. Now this incredibly private family, all these secrets are laid bare, and the royal family were really shocked. They were shocked, they felt betrayed, and they never spoke to her ever again. If you leave and you talk, then that is the end of any relationship you've ever had with the royals.
Harry's been brought up with servants, but for Meghan it's a whole new and luxurious way of life. Prince Charles's former butler, Grant Harold, trains staff to cater for the famous, rich and royal.
At the state dinner at Buckingham Palace, pudding cutlery always goes at the top. As well as doing all the traditional things you expect, I teach them how to shake hands, how to sit down correctly, how to walk correctly.
When you do a breakfast tray in a royal home, the teapot, make sure that it's already pre-warmed. We've got some toast. Royal homes, stately homes, they tend to cut the crust off. Now, there was an old rule from years ago that married ladies could have because they weren't married and they were looking for a husband.
Princess Margaret famously used to be brought a breakfast tray, I think at 9 o'clock every morning, and then she'd spend the next 2 hours lying in bed, reading the papers and chain smoking.
Try to keep it level as you go up the stairs.
She'd be brought buttered eggs. She wouldn't ever call, they weren't supposed to be called scrambled eggs because scrambled was deemed common, but buttered eggs supposedly was what she was brought on her breakfast tray.
You get to this point, knock twice, you just want to...
Come in. Good morning. Good morning. Is the tray all right here? Perfect, thank you.
Meghan can learn from the Queen how to be the hostess with the mostess at her own royal palace.
You and I might have a dinner party and invite perhaps 6 friends round. The Queen very often will have a banquet for hundreds of people at Buckingham Palace. And although she has all these people to do the work, she is actually a fantastically good hostess and quite a proud hostess. And she will go and check the arrangements before any banquet. If she's got a visitor coming to stay, like Barack Obama,
thank you so much.
she will inspect the rooms. She would choose which suite of rooms they're going to stay in Buckingham Palace, and she will check them out. She will select some books to put by their bedsides, and she would generally prepare for a guest like you and I might prepare for a guest.
There are even strict rules for those royal guests to follow.
If you're lucky enough to go to an event at Buckingham Palace, what might surprise you is that the menu will not be in English, it will be written in French, which is a very old royal tradition. It's quite nice, and I think it keeps people on their toes as well, because when they sit down, they've suddenly got to really concentrate on what the menu says. If you're dining with the Queen, you've got to make sure that before the Queen stops eating, you've finished. If you haven't, then unfortunately, the staff will come in and take your plate away.
But dinner at Meghan's place is likely to be a much more informal affair.
Meghan loves to cook, we know that, and she loves to entertain and prepare food for her friends. So I think moving to a much bigger space, we're going to see her entertaining more, lots of private parties with pals, where I think it'll be quite relaxed.
I don't think you'd be very relaxed if you were invited over to Meghan's house for a party. Can you imagine?
Meghan and Harry's more relaxed attitude to protocol means they won't surround themselves with servants.
There has been an attempt from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to have fewer staff around them. And I think that the trend of the younger royals having a smaller staff is going to be even more intensified with Harry and Meghan setting up home in Frogmore Cottage.
I can't think that Meghan and Harry will ever want a huge number of staff, but I do think that they will need somebody who will manage whether Harry and Meghan would go the whole hog and have valets and footmen. Harry, I think, finds his father's lifestyle probably a bit over the top. He is of a much younger generation, obviously, and he's had a lot of friends, and he's been to their houses. He was in the army. He is probably more comfortable with the frugality than the huge staffing levels and luxury.
At the last count, Prince Charles had 118 staff, which means he never has to do his own chores. A 2003 documentary shows Harry cleaning his own boots, something his dad can't get his head around.
What? Yes, I'm not just doing it for them. I'm not just doing it for them. I always do it. I always clean them. I played yesterday. I didn't have a chance. If someone else to do it for you. Huh.
Prince Charles famously had valets who did quite a lot for him. They put toothpaste on his toothbrush. Sometimes if you have that level of assistance, it can seem that you're divorced from reality to a degree.
There have been a lot of stories about Charles. There is no doubt that he likes his luxury, and he is a bit pampered because he has the staff to pamper him. He does have a very bad back and does like to sleep on his own mattress, if that is humanly possible. And he certainly takes cushions to sit on and to put his back against on chairs. The idea that he travels the world with his own lavatory seat is nonsense.
The first royal moderniser was William and Harry's mother, the Princess of Wales.
Diana was revolutionary.
Diana wanted a completely different approach to how royalty dealt with staff. Before her marriage in 1981, she had spent some limited time at Buckingham Palace and was befriended by one of the Queen's stewards, who was incredibly helpful to Diana at a difficult time. You know, here you have an 18, 19-year-old, and she thought, well, look, you know, maybe that's how I should sort of treat my staff. The protocol, before I even went to the Kensington Palace, you always referred to them first thing in the morning, Your Royal Highness. Almost from day one, when Diana came out of the door and I said, oh, bow my head, good morning, Your Royal Highness. She said, oh, you can stop all that crap, Ken, you know. You know, she effectively was running the house by speaking to the chefs, you know, speaking to the housekeepers, going to see the chauffeurs, letting them know what her word was, which was a complete change in how royalty dealt with their staff.
Diana loved to be down in the kitchens, and Harry and William used to go into the kitchen and ask for treats and snacks.
I remember hearing from a former palace aide that the chef that they had at Kensington Palace used to get frustrated sometimes because Diana would just take it upon herself to go up in the kitchen and make the boys a pudding or, you know, bowls of ice cream, and that was his job. But she just
really enjoyed this closeness to staff, which was almost an anathema to the prince, who found that her relationship with staff was probably too close for comfort.
And Diana's sons clearly want more relaxed households.
We obviously see William as well not wanting to perhaps have the closeness of a valet that his father did.
We only need to look at the Cambridges and see how small their staff are to see how that's kind of inspired the way they bring up their children.
A discreet advertisement in the Lady magazine in 2015, seeking a housekeeper, may have been placed on behalf of the Cambridge family.
What was interesting was that they wanted one person. They're trying to keep it as minimally staffed as possible because I think they don't want the children growing up. They're already growing up with a very privileged life. So I think William and Kate want to keep them grounded so that they understand that privilege, but that they don't take advantage of that privilege. That's very important.
And it'll be no different for Harry and Meghan.
It's going to be a much smaller, intimate household in which they want to bring up their baby.
Will they have a housekeeper? Possibly. It ends there because for them, they want the craziness of being a member of the royal family to end when they go inside their homes.
As they step onto the international stage, Harry and Meghan will have to balance two extremes: family life and royal life.
Frogmore is a royal residence. It belongs to the Crown Estates, and it is very grand. So life will be much more royal than it was in the early days when they were together.
This royal life will take them across the world, and even possibly to a new home.
Perhaps they might think about an overseas property, the Hamptons maybe. I can see Harry rocking some swim shorts in the Hamptons.
Bit of Ralph Lauren over the shoulders.
Yeah.
I think Meghan's going to want somewhere by the sea, perhaps in California, in Malibu, somewhere where the days are long and the weather is hot. I could even imagine them taking a small apartment in New York. That would feel Meghan.
I'd like that. That would be quite nice, wouldn't it?
And they'll redefine how the royal family works and lives.
In recent years, we've seen William, Kate, Harry and Meghan leading the normalisation of the royal family, taking the royal family into a very new era, making it clear that they are people just like you and I, albeit in much nicer homes.
A Victorian Gothic mansion with 57 rooms set in 87 acres.
Bagshot Park is one of the largest properties that the Queen's given out to her children or grandchildren. It's so big that just a few years ago, Edward and Sophie had to hire a programme coordinator just to look after the various members of staff.
There's the glass coach driving directly past our camera.
When the perfect property isn't available, the Queen goes shopping. She splashed the cash to buy her daughter her dream home.
Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips, who she married, were both very, very keen horse people. And when they married, there were no properties available within the royal portfolio. And so the Queen found Gatcombe Park for them, which is absolutely perfect for their equestrian needs.
Gatcombe Park is very much a working farm, and there are saddles and riding boots and hay. No one is standing on ceremony.
The Queen funded her second son, Prince Andrew, when he and wife Sarah Ferguson built their own home.
They designed and built this huge country house not far from Windsor called Sunninghill Park. It seemed to be very brash and modern and very unroyal.
It was of a time. It was of the 80s, and the 80s were not the most beautiful aesthetically. I imagine inside it was filled with pelmets of swags of shot silk everywhere.
If you look at how Fergie dressed in the 80s, I imagine it would look like that.
I'm like big puffed shoulders, like the curtains reflecting that.
For sure.
It was immediately labelled South York after South Fork, the Dallas television series. I thought it looked more like a Tesco supermarket.
But Fergie and Andrew took it on the chin. They didn't care. They loved living there, and it's where they began raising their children.
But the house didn't last much longer than the marriage. It was sold to a Kazakh oligarch who let it fall into disrepair and then pulled it down. The Queen gifted William use of an apartment in Kensington Palace and Anma Hall on her Sandringham estate in Norfolk.
William obviously has been going to Sandringham since he was a dot, so he knows that area very well. It's relatively private. Part of William and Kate's decision to go to Norfolk was because they have this very tight-knit group of friends there. The Turnip Toffs, these would be people who'd been mates with the Queen and Prince Charles, you know, multiple generations.